one of those Walter White beards lately. I've been kind of obsessed. I think for Halloween to get the hat and the glasses, and that would be really awesome. Although I've still got kind of enough, I could kind of try for a middle-aged version of Jesse, perhaps. I don't know. Wishful thinking, perhaps. Why aren't I going to Osaka? Well, I'd like to go. I don't have that level of freedom from work or family. I have only a couple of hours each day. I'd love to go down there, and I will go down one of these at one point. But sorry, I can't get down for the gathering, Sean. Well, people actually have questions. This is pretty sweet. And this is the cool thing about this as well. Of course, I can give all my attention to you and not just have to talk with Victor. So, yeah. Hey, Holland, how's it going? Or the Netherlands, as it goes. This is pretty sweet. How's the quality for you guys? The quality looks much better than it is on 2.5 Oyajis for me. I can do some more clever tricks as well. For example, I could take a screen cap and broadcast the screen cap. For example, I could put a Skype conversation up like this as picture-in-picture. How is the sound? The sound, I can see this is kind of cool here. I can see my sound levels a lot better than I could see on the Hangout. But yeah, it all looks kind of cool. So, I guess all we need is topics to talk about. I'm back drinking the regular old vegetable juice. The lag here is pretty terrible, and I was told by some people at YouTube how to fix the lag on this, but only on there's an old platform and a new platform. And apparently I learned something. The reason that there's a 40-second lag with the sound is because the comments or the stream doesn't post until the video from this is encoded into every stream for mobile and for PC in every resolution. And so it actually takes like 40 seconds for the stream to do that on every single accessible thing. So apparently if you can turn down if you can like focus on one resolution and turn down the mobile access and all that sort of stuff, you can actually improve the latency. I can see the comments more quickly. But as it happens, I'm looking at the screen of myself playing live on my other computer, and it's like 40, I counted it before, it's like 45 seconds late. I tested it by dancing, and it took 40 seconds for me to start dancing. Which, it never takes that long for me to start dancing, so there's something obviously seriously wrong with it. So yeah, which means I'm going to be reacting to your comments super late. So I apologize for that. It's going to take like a minute before I get to them each time, but I will still get to them. And yeah, so like Ecstatic Jack said about 40 seconds ago, yes, you can do screen sharing and stuff like that, which I always thought it'd be kind of cool. I could do like a picture-in-picture here of myself with like news articles that I like, for example, or show my Flipboard off. That'd be kind of cool. I didn't do enough preparation to set that up today. Honestly, just getting the sound and the video and everything kind of synced for this is enough effort. This isn't easy to use stuff. It's called Wirecast, which is the standard. Well, it's not made by Google or YouTube. It's a third-party software, but it's like the main platform for broadcasting. Yeah, if you want to hook into the live feature. So yeah, so Sean Wilson is asking, coming back to work in Japan next year. It's been a few years, and we've heard that the tax rates have increased. Do I know anything about that? Yes, they have not increased yet, but they will increase. When are they going to increase? I think they're going to increase like 3% next year, and then another year after that, another 2%. It'll be basically a 5%. It'll increase in sales tax from 5% to 10%. Japanese scream blue murder over any increase to the sales tax, but truth is Japan has one of the lowest sales taxes in the world. The thing about the sales tax, of course, is that the reason governments love to use the sales tax is because it's cheaper and easier to collect. It's much more efficient than something like an income tax. It kind of collects itself. Every time you do a transaction, the shopkeepers do it all for you. And so there's this thing that you can actually collect a lot more revenue than you can through like regular income taxes. And so what happened in New Zealand? New Zealand was one of the first countries to have a sales tax, and it was actually like, we used to have like 66% income tax. By bringing in like a 12.5% sales tax, they were able to cut the income tax from 66% to 33%. The only problem from that was everyone all of a sudden had extra money, so it was actually inflationary because prices only went up 12%, but incomes went up by much more because of the people paying less tax, at least out of their pockets, for the sales tax, for the income tax. So they actually had to control prices and inflation from that, and Japan's trying to get out of inflation, so a sales tax seems like a really good idea for that. The problem is that they're not giving any tax relief anywhere else. This is just purely for more spending. So it's just increased prices with no increased wages or increased other benefits. So it just sucks. And a lot of people, the first 5% sales tax came in at the time that the bubble ended. In fact, a lot of people blame it for the end of the bubble. And I think it's probably, there's a debate whether it was just bad timing and a coincidence that it accompanied the end of the bubble, or whether it caused the end of the bubble. But it caused such a trauma in Japan that, people are kind of afraid of the next one. And it's what brought down the Democrats, the fact that they campaigned against the sales tax, and then they switched prime ministers to a guy who was all for it. So, that is how that is. So some more questions. Did I read the article about... Yes, the article of violence against foreign women. Lock up your white women. Japan is not safe to be a foreign woman. Yeah, I'm still getting crap about that on Twitter tonight and all day yesterday and today on Facebook. I very flippantly... Well, so on that article, I was a bit mean to the lady because of the title, basically. It says, Japan is no place or no safe place for foreign women. I mean, there's no country in the world that's absolutely safe. I still think, there's two sides to this. I think every woman, not just foreign women, Japanese women as well, everyone I've ever met has stories about dealing with weirdos. Not the same kind of risk of getting mugged or raped or, beaten up or stabbed that you might have even a country like New Zealand or countries in Europe or whatever. That kind of safety thing, that whole idea. I don't think there's anywhere in Japan that's not safe for a woman to walk at night. But that said, instead of that, people have to deal with gropers on trains, strange kind of stalkers or geeks or weirdos, and everyone's got a story about that in different degrees, and some stuff admittedly kind of scary, and some kind of, foreign women being just presumed to be prostitutes or streetwalkers sometimes and propositioned randomly. You hear that this happens. So people, so this lady kind of related two experiences. One very alarming that happened a few years ago in Osaka, that she was picked up by a stranger and carried to the entrance of a love hotel. So that sounds like assault, kidnapping, attempted rape. And she got away from that. She didn't mention that she complained to the police about that. But what prompted her to write the story was two strangers accosting her while she was on her bicycle. She didn't understand the Japanese that they were saying, but she said that they basically seemed to be accusing her. They held her bike and were accusing her of having stolen the bike. First a man came up, and then a woman came up to back him up. So she felt these people must be scamsters or something like that, trying to, intimidate her. The man holding the tire of the bike apparently pulled the bike halfway across the road with her still on it, and she managed to yank it away and get away. But she was, held up by them for 10 minutes. I very flippantly, maybe too flippantly, said, lady has a bad day and declares Japan to be unsafe for foreign women. Which, was probably a little bit harsh on the lady. I mean, so there was a bit of a debate. Is that assault? I went to law school, and we have debates like this. If a man grabs the bicycle but not the lady, but the bicycle makes contact with the lady, but he thought the bicycle was his, or maybe he didn't think the bicycle was his, but, is it assault? Is it battery? Is it a crime? The kicker for this is, of course, she went to the police, and the police could have done something. They didn't have to necessarily arrest anybody, but they could have intervened. But they just told her, leave us alone, no, it's not news. And I kind of, while I could see it would probably be pretty tough to treat that as assault, as I said, somewhat insensitively over and over, in my mind, this just constitutes a really bad day. It's like being falsely accused of shoplifting or something like that. It's pretty upsetting. But, obviously there's a lot of sympathy and a lot of similar experiences from a lot of people out there, and I got quite rightly called out for being a bit too insensitive towards the author. And frankly, the title of it, No Safe Place for Foreign Women, is deliberately provocative, and probably not the choice of the author. It's probably from the copywriters of the Japan Times, just trying to, sensationalize and lock up your white women kind of stuff, which annoyed me, and so I put up a passive-aggressive post, and I'm still getting flack for it. So yes, I heard about that story. I talk way too much about these things. Let's see. I am actually now more than 49% along, 49 seconds behind. So, Sean Wilson asking about income tax. I don't think income tax is changing in the near future. Maybe for the top income tax brackets, but certainly nothing else. Hugo Major asking, is the NSA stuff here in the news in Japan? Yes, it is. It's kind of funny. I guess there's less, well, I don't know if there's less alarm. There's kind of a presumption in Japan that you're being spied on. I think Japanese are much more actually aware of not only the potential for invasion of personal privacy, but the consequences of it. Because in Japan, trading of personal information is a big industry of the mob, of Yakuza. They use it for loan sharking, for targeting people, and Japanese, throughout society that seem to have a general awareness and sensitivity of, that's what can happen if you give out personal information. And indeed, part of the problem with Nichan, for example, is that, if it's precisely these people who go onto YouTube and show their school that they teach at or tell their name or something like that, people, because Japan is so private, they take that as an invitation to come and hassle them. And so I think when this kind of there are cameras everywhere in Japan in train stations and highways and stuff, and this is how they tracked a lot of Aum Shinrikyo members. And this has all been around for a long time, so hearing the NSA stuff I don't think is really that much of a surprise to anybody, and it really, frankly, probably shouldn't be. There's not a lot of hysteria, but it certainly has been in the news. But not in a kind of hysterical or kind of, oh my god, I can't believe the Americans did this. I think everybody kind of, and frankly, even in Europe, are they really acting that surprised? They seem to be, if you look at the BBC, but everyone knows that they've been, since Echelon, they've, since the 1970s or 60s, they've been able to listen in on most of the world's phone calls, allegedly, but that seems perfectly plausible to me. Ahmed Zombie, good to see you, man. Always enjoy the posts on YouTube, on Facebook. Have I ever met Arabs that lived in Japan, not including long-term tourists? So have I met Arabs? No, I've met Iranians, many Iranians, but they are of course Persians. Not many, and when I say many, there are many Persians in Japan. I've had a couple of friends. I used to work with a Moroccan who was a naturalized Japanese citizen. He recently became Japanese. He was not a typical Moroccan guy, and do Moroccans count as Arabs? I'm not sure if actually. I guess they do. He was actually half Spanish, half Moroccan, and his parents were diplomats. So he was kind of from a very elite family, and not. But I guess he was half Arab in that sense. But to tell you the truth, I don't know many Arabs. So yeah, you don't seem to run into Arabs per se in Japan very often. There's an interesting thing that's been in the news lately that the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry and Ministry of the Tourism Agency has been doing a lot of research and promotion. And this was before the Olympics thing, but it certainly is probably going to gather momentum. Probably aim more at Indonesia and Malaysia, looking at attracting tourism from other Asian markets. But in all sorts of ways, actually. Japan is trying to attract, for example, foreign nurses and basically workers from Philippines. They're looking at ways to kind of bring in with the labor shortage, obviously, they bring in the caregiving industries and so on, nurses from Indonesia and Philippines. And a big area of difficulty, I think, for doing that, particularly for people from Muslim countries, is the inability of Japan to accommodate. It's impossible to get halal food or, to live life here according to religious dietary codes. There's no understanding of them. And so the government's actually sponsoring a lot of research into trying to foster Islamic tourism to Japan and to accommodate them so that they're comfortable while they're here. It's not aimed at Arabs. It's aimed primarily at Asian Muslims, but at the same time, I hope that the payoff of that is that we end up getting more Arab tourists here. It'd be cool to see. I've sat on a long flight, actually, a couple of weeks after 9/11, next to a chap from Oman and from rural Oman, and he was very conservative, and we had a very interesting conversation, especially given the timing. But yeah, I can't say I've ever had that many real conversations with Arabs, unfortunately, although I do enjoy talking with people like yourself, and guys from all around the world on Facebook who I do enjoy interacting with, and yeah, it'd be cool to meet up one day. Sean is asking me, what about crazy things I've seen? What are some crazy things I've seen? He saw some guy banging on the subway window on the way to work the other day. Everyone's got crazy. I mean, 25 million people in Tokyo, and they all have to use the subways. So you're always going to get some loons. I think the worst I've ever really experienced would be the on the Inokashira line, which I used to commute on. There was the very front of that train is real sardine territory, and yeah, they and that is serious, like, you cannot move, can barely kind of breathe kind of territory. The first 3 cars on the Inokashira line coming into Shibuya in the morning, and I used to live 2 stops from Shibuya. I used to live in Kumamoto Daimai. So the train is fully packed by the time it comes in, and it's always kind of a thing. Some students would always get off from the front of the train, so I could step in where someone had stepped off from beside the door. But there was this one guy, and I saw a few episodes with this guy, with other people. He was clearly claustrophobic, but well, if he's claustrophobic, you can go to the back of the train where it's not so crowded. But he seemed to want to always be in the front. But anytime anyone brushed him, he would react like with he'd have a face mask and bags and stuff, and he would just like growl and had this kind of road rage reaction to people. And I saw him get into flare-ups with other people. And so one day, it was my turn. I tried to get someone stood off, and there was a gap where that person was standing, which I went to step into. But the crazy guy was there, and he was standing on the other side of that gap, and he was holding some plastic bags, and he held his arms over the gap to try to make it look full or something, like he was trying to make space. But someone just stood there. So rather than, I did the Japanese passive aggressive thing. I turned around, not facing him. I stood in backwards into the spot that had opened up, and the doors were about to close, and all of a sudden I get thrust basically back onto the platform, like in a single push. I'm right beside the door, so this guy said, boom. He screams, and he gives me this huge shot back onto the platform and shouts at me, Gaijin, you pushed into me. And I was a bit shocked, I've been physically, that's assault technically, the guy shouting at me, he was shouting Gaijin something. And but there again, I had to go to work. I said, look, the guy just got off the spot there, that's my spot, I'm getting back in. And I got back in, and he was growling at me the whole way. The 2 stops, it was only for 5 minutes. It was very unpleasant. But I gotta say, having been on as many trains as I've been in as many years, the fact that that's the worst that's happened is saying something. But I've certainly had it happen. And there was a story. What was it? There's a guy on Twitter that I sometimes interact with, who was actually featured in a story where he was attacked by a crazy old guy on a train, and ended up winning a criminal case and a civil case, and got a payout from the guy. But it became a huge topic on Niche, and it was kind of interesting hearing about that. There's a story about it. It was covered on Japan Today a wee while ago, back in 2010. So stuff happens, but fortunately, almost no drama in all my time there. But I'm talking and not answering questions, so let's move it along. We got Dutch people in the house. We got yes, No Country for Old Men. Mitchell McCombs pointing out quite correctly. Yeah, I was obviously just in a passive aggressive mood that day. There's Moto's asking, are there a lot of white Russian prostitutes in Japan? I don't know. I hate to. You don't want to stereotype people. There are lots of white Russian women. There's a lot of Russians who come here to study, of course, for them. But the far east of Russia is, hey, I can see Russia from my back window. But you literally can in some parts of Japan. The Northeast Territories are actually within view of Japan. Technically Japan doesn't consider them Russia, but they're full of Russian people at the moment, and you've got the whole Vladivostok and the Far East. So there's a lot of Russians who come here. If you're in Sakhalin or Kamchatka, Russia's the big smoke. So of course a lot of people just come here because they're interested in Japan, but certainly there is an association of Russians with the entertainment industry, and unfortunately there have been some incidents. Like not Russian, but there was a stabbing incident some months ago involving a kid who was the half Romanian, and his mother, apparently, according to the weeklies, worked in an entertainment industry and whatever. So no question it happened. Certainly in Kashiwa, where I used to live, there were some blonde girl bars, and I think they were all, my friends went there and said that they were all Russian. That doesn't make them prostitutes, by the way. Hostessing and prostituting is very, very different. But, there are some grey zones in there. Michael Gillen Pickett, good to see you, man. How's it going? So, The Taste 1962. Thanks for pointing out that horrible Japan Times thing wasn't well written. Yeah, it's the Japan Times. Honestly, they're finished as a source of worthy news. I barely follow them. I only really follow them if other people, post something. So yeah, there's models. Yeah, be very careful what you put on Facebook. You never know. Let's try to catch up. Ecstatic Jack met a Turkish family on a skateboard trip across Japan. Turkey and Japan have a very interesting relationship. There's not a deep connection between Japan and Turkey, but what there is there, for whatever reasons, and there are various kind of reasons, that Turkey and Japan really consider themselves to be very close friends, or at least they get on very well. I mean, very different relationship, for example, to Indonesia and Japan, where there's actually, blood spilt and all this sort of stuff. A lot of Japanese veterans stayed in Indonesia after the end of World War II to support the partisan Javanese who were fighting against the Dutch. So, for people who believed in the ideology of what Japan was doing in World War II, that they were liberating Asia from, white colonization, in Indonesia in particular, a lot of people actually bought into that so much that they didn't even bother going home after the war. And, there's a lot of veterans, and not only with that, in Taiwan as well. And that's where Japan has these special relationships with Taiwan and Indonesia and some countries, in spite of all the negative history and associated with those places, that a lot of Japanese still alive today, and heads of big corporations actually fought alongside and got independence, and with the people of those countries after World War II. It's not widely known history, but nothing like that with Turkey. But they all seem to be very good friends, which is a good thing. It's very nice to see. I'm always very happy to see people, being nice with Japan, as indeed I am. So Michael Pickett has a question or a comment. I think some people in Europe were surprised about the NSA thing. I mean, the Secret Service is necessary, but for some reason we all spy on our friends seems like BS. How many of your friends do you eavesdrop on? Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in military and intelligence connected family, but, New Zealand. So, we just keep tabs on all the sheep. That's pretty much all that we do. There is a clear thing that, at least between enemies, having a certain level of spying, is something which is understood and accepted and actually contributes to stability and mutual. It's the trust but verify. That it's a knowledge verification mechanism which can actually foster stability and peace. And so there's the argument that having widespread spying should be understood and accepted as a given. But at the same time, what about when the German government is trying to decide whether to purchase Boeing or Airbus airplanes, or if they're going to sponsor, Lufthansa doing that? What about world trade? What about trade negotiations? Or if you're negotiating with someone who can hear the calls of the president, where's the sovereignty? I mean, and what does that make America? I mean, does it really make America the king of the world? Is it the Leonardo DiCaprio on the front of the Titanic? That's kind of how it looks lately. And is that something which Europe accepts? Is Europe an equal partner to America, or is it just accepted that America's got access to and spies on everything? And what do you do about that? I think it's kind of, it is a fact that the Americans can do it and will do it because they can do it. And who knows how you can work against it. But, is that the way it should be, or are there benefits from it? There are some benefits, but I totally agree that it's BS. And, and certainly I think unless America is called on it, which they never really have been called on it before, and they've been doing it for a long time. None of this is new stuff. So I don't know. As you say, I think it's BS. But although in the case of Britain, where you're from, so there's this whole thing. America isn't allowed to spy on its own people, but it could get the information from British intelligence on who's allowed to spy on Americans. The whole idea of, echelon and these networks of different intelligence. And New Zealand provides eavesdropping data to America and Britain. And, we can spy on anyone we want. So it all works so that in the end of the day, the cooperation, particularly amongst the Anglo-Saxon countries, makes sovereignty kind of meaningless anyway. But and is that a good thing? I mean, honestly, I'm all for world government and all that sort of good stuff. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I understand Merkel being upset. Yeah, it's more just mentions the Turkish food places love Turkish food. But I used to actually work at I was going to say Turkish and it wasn't. It was Greek, which I'm definitely never mix those two up. It's like mixing up a Palestinian or an Israeli restaurant. The food is actually very similar, but you don't want to mix them up. But yes, I love. I mean, I'm a lamb man. I'm from New Zealand, so of course, big fan of Turkish food. And yeah, there's some great Turkish food in Tokyo, but not a lot of Arab food. I don't know what's with that. It'd be nice to see some more. And by the way, Ahmed, thanks for the thing on the Tunisian, Moroccan, and Algerians and so on. Right, so we have the Maghrebs and so on who are Arabs, and yeah, of course they are. This was the whole, and for a time it wasn't just Morocco, of course, all of Spain and everything. So lots of good history with that. So Ahmed, was Turkey actually an ally of Japan in World War II? I think in World War II they were neutral, weren't they? And it was funny because Turkey was an ally of Germany in the First World War, but a lot of people don't realize that in the First World War, Japan was on the Allies' side. They were on Britain. They protected British and Australian shipping. They switched sides in World War II. What was Italy in World War I? Was Italy on the Allied side or the German side? I think they were probably on the Allied side. But yeah. Was Turkey actually, Turkey was certainly at best neutral. Were they actually an ally of Nazi Germany? I don't know about that. I don't think that's it. I think when you see the stories, they talk about a shipwreck or something of, Turkish people looked after a Japanese crew, or Japanese people looked after a Turkish crew, and, the people they saved went on to be great big politicians or something. I've heard lots of stories like that. But, yeah. And as Michael Pickett points out, exactly what I said. I mean, exactly. If NSA can hear everything, it's not just spying for security, counting numbers of nuclear weapons. It's industrial espionage. That's exactly what it is. And that's just not cool. That's not cool. White Magic 4. Genki, yeah. I'm rocking a dude on Genki. Read an article the other day that a very big portion of Japanese youth are not interested in relationships and marriage. Oh, don't get me started. That's what I really wanted to talk about on 2.5 Oyajis the other night. It's kind of hard to get into that discussion with some people who are more focused on the, I don't know. Japan's 1 minute it's nothing. Everyone are sex crazed, pervert maniacs, and the next minute it's nothing. I realize it's not exactly film at 11 that Japan is just a normal country with mostly normal people. But it doesn't really won't sell a newspaper. And the nice thing about Japan is that you can make up some kind of wacky news about it, and it seems somehow it'd be kind of scoffed at, and it'd discredit the paper if you said something about that, like with South Africa or New Zealand or, France. With Japan, anything kind of seems credible, let's face it, even for my own family, Japan is a little bit like Mars. You can write, hey, skateboarding backwards, painted purple naked is big on Mars at the moment. But yeah, I kind of get that. I can see how that would be a thing. And on Mars, I always wanted to go to Mars. That's kind of how it is with Japan. There's a presumption that you can just say whatever you like and no one's ever going to be able to verify it, except for the small, ignored, constantly outraged community of people in Japan, and within that, the even smaller community of people who actually live here and care about that stuff and don't actually make a living of writing the BS themselves. So we're a very small endangered minority, but yeah. So there has been a lot of buzz in Japanese tabloid media about certainly declining interest in marriage, and these niches, these little subculture niches, including like the nerds and so on, who, you know, are opting out of relationships with people. And indeed, the thing about women not wanting to marry, you know, having quite happy lives with their getting paid just enough and having just enough hobbies and enough control over their lives and so on, and independence, and not wanting to go into the many social obligations that comes with having a marriage or children. You know, there's kind of an urban, well, there's a bunch of trends. There was a government paper talking about this, which kind of linked together, maybe a little bit unfairly to some extent, but linking together the shut-ins, the hikikomori who can't get out of their homes, with the NEETs, the neither in employment or training, education or training, the people who are basically kind of unemployed, staying at home with their parents, you know, playing video games, but having quite comfortable lives, or having kind of, and people living on part-time jobs, not full-time jobs. And again, in Japan, you can earn, well, there's a lot of part-time jobs that you can earn enough that you can get by, you can live on your own and have a pretty, you know, normal life without ever saving anything or having any kind of a future. But there again, it's so hard to find regular company jobs coming out of university at the moment, where that was kind of a failure option that would cause panic in people when it started to happen about 10 years ago, really under Koizumi. There's a lot of people now who have kind of come to the conclusion, yeah, why would you want to go to become a salaryman, lose your whole life and control of everything, when you can have more time for hobbies and personal fulfillment, living on just enough, on being permanently part-time employed. And there's a whole generation of kind of these freeters who are very alarming to policymakers and to people who came through a society where, you know, getting a job, a stable job and a stable company and getting a wife and children was kind of the whole mission and, you know, everybody's obligation in life. These people have completely kind of backlashed against that. And, you know, aspects of the tabloid media that like to play up how, you know, the people, yeah, the sexless aspects of that and so on, that's been in the media, but as like a really common trend or phenomenon, or something that's broad spread across the society, it's always been focused, to me, pretty much on very specific kind of demographics and subcultures. So the way it's kind of been blown up, and, you know, as usual, a very the way that they paint it as being like a trend or a fashion is kind of offensive, because it's more subtle than that. But there again, never try to, you know, if I'm writing a story about a particular subculture for the Guardian newspaper, and I want to be very specific about, you know, you have to understand that the specific subcultures, its effects and why, they'll go, no, just make it for everybody. And they do that, you know, because no one's going to check it, and that's what happens. So, you know, there's some, as usual, there's some grains of truth to it, but it's always as usual with these things, like with the eye licking and like with, you know, all the other stuff, it's overblown. Desmondos, that's the one I might have heard of, the Ottoman frigate. I'll probably mispronounce this, but Ertugrul, yeah. Yeah. I occasionally chat with people on Facebook from Turkey as well, and they talk about this. British intelligence has been useless since 1963, Burgess McLean. Is that a quote, or is that the people who are responsible for making British intelligence useless? I do not know, but well, I don't know. British intelligence is kind of, it's got its they've obviously benefited a lot from the Bond thing. You know, and the SAS has a fairly positive public profile, although there's a few too many people that have gone off and written books, as indeed happens with SEALs, you know, which kind of necessitate, which is a breach, by the way, of the oath that they have to take when they join, which I understand is meaning that they're going to form something new. But Britain, I don't know, it doesn't have a bad reputation, I don't think, but, you know. Now, so I seem to have caught up to the comments, at least that I can see. But as usual, these things take a while to update, so you can find me some more comments. So I just refreshed the screen and I see some new comments. Old and youth, good to see you, man. Good to see you. And yeah, here's some interesting. I will do my best to bring the interesting talk. Who knows? I'm completely unprepared. This is actually a technical test. This is using. So tell me, this looks a lot better quality than the Hangouts that I do with Victor. Not just for the fact that it's just me talking, the actual video quality as well. What do you think? Is this cool? I mean, I should use this more often. It is a real pain to set up, but I think if I get into a habit of doing it, I can expand on this a little bit. So tell me if that is the case. By the way, how was the video clip? I don't know if you guys saw the video clip. I'll play it again. If you can hear the sound and the video all comes out all right. There we go. Oh, so does that play okay? I mean, this stuff is all very cool, actually. So, yes, I'm enjoying that. So White Magic asking, what is the Japanese government doing for working mothers, and do they have plans to raise fertility rates in Japan? Yeah. The problem is, of course, the governing party at the moment, really, like the average age is, 80 years old or something, and it's a party of social conservatives, mainly from rural areas. So it means that, they don't necessarily tackle the problems of modern working mothers quite on the same wavelength. There's an actual interesting thing with this. It was one of the probably that and the sales tax are what brought down the LDP and got the Democrats into power. And when the Democrats came into power about 4 years ago, they actually aligned with the Social Democrat Party, which is pretty much known as like a feminist. It's almost an all-women's party, or at least it was at the time, and a women's issues party. And there was a lot of expectation that, in terms of these social issues, how the Japanese government was always an embarrassment and out of touch on fertility issues and working mothers and so on, that there might actually be some progress on it. And they actually put the head of the Social Democrats Party, a lady called, surname Fukushima, as the Minister of Social Welfare, and her mission was to, fix up the daycare situation and to address all that. And even me, I was thinking, well, if there's one thing that the Social Democrats are going to be, able to do well at, it's got to be that. But it's an issue with many challenges, obviously, and you dealing between government and the bureaucrats, and getting them to do what you want them to do is also a very difficult aspect of the job in Japan. And whatever happened, I think she tried for a while and she didn't really get very good results, and she kind of lost interest. And then while she was Minister of Social Welfare, she was in Okinawa protesting against the relocation of the American base there, and then pulled out of coalition without ever having achieved anything. And the result of that is that, the party went from like 4 or 5% support to 0.10, margin of error level support, and, they're just a complete disaster. There are definitely the issue of providing adequate daycare, particularly in urban centers like Tokyo, is a big issue. It's not just an issue in Japan, of course. It is in New York and Sydney and London as well. In terms of encouraging people to have kids, I mean, the government has they have a child allowance. If you have children, you just automatically, no matter what income you're on, you get like a cash to spend. So it's like you get little cash, as a regular income. You have these cash bonuses for having and raising children. I don't know if that's actually caused any kind of a bump in the rates. There's a kind of a famous thing a few years ago where people talking about the fertility rate. There was like an 85-year-old LDP veteran who was talking about the fertility issue, the population issue. By the way, no one ever raises immigration in connection with this. It's like a don't go there kind of a thing. They only think of how do we make more Japanese. And this guy's, I remember the way he phrased it. It was kind of he said, I think the way you have to look at this, you have to think of women as being like machines whose purpose is producing babies. And the problem right now is that there are too many broken machines. And so how do we fix them so that they produce more? And, of course, that went down very, very well with the feminists. I mean, the idea that women are machines whose only purpose is pumping out babies. I mean, that's exactly why it is. If there is a backlash, I mean, that kind of attitude would certainly foster it. But yeah, that is what that is. So I think they kind of lost. I mean, certainly Japan isn't as bad as South Korea or Singapore, and that's been another kind of thing which has been coming up in response to the sexlessness story going around. But it has a very low fertility rate, and frankly, if you ask me why, I think it's because if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're living in Tokyo or Osaka, I think you can enjoy a much, much better quality of life and a much more interesting life single, including sex, but certainly but single than with kids. I mean, having kids in Tokyo is a real drag. People expect you not to use trains, and the social expectations are crushing. You all of a sudden have to not only look after the kid, but the family of your own family, your own grandparents and the grandparents of the husband. And there's a lot of social obligations and stuff attached with like getting married to someone and joining with another family. You kind of lose all your freedom. And there's kind of, the society isn't really that kind to having people having kids. To put a stroller on a train, you can get some, nasty looks, or people are expected as a social convention not to take kids on the train during rush hour. But then what do you do? If you can't drive, you're supposed to use taxis. They're crazy expensive. If you're single in Japan, you're sleeping every day, you do whatever job you want. I think, so, that's what is, I think that's a big factor for people who are like opting as a lifestyle choice not to get married and not to have kids. I think it's just a sign of Japan's success. It's done too well. It's too the lifestyle here, I think, is too comfortable. It's fantastic being single here. Never come to Japan married. Trying to come here single if you can. I was very lucky. I came over here engaged, and we broke up, and that was like the best thing that ever happened to me. But for Japanese people, not just for Gaijin people, for Japanese people as well, Tokyo is like, I think, one of the best places in the world to be single. It's just, you can do anything. You can snowboard, you can surf, you can eat Syrian food, you can, anything you can think of, you can find you. It's a city of 25 million people. But the moment you have kids here, it's actually probably less convenient than it is in Western countries to have kids. And at the end of the day, I think the whole government kind of has to switch a focus around to being more lifestyle oriented, which Japan really isn't at the moment. It's for work and hobbies, and frankly, I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, that's what I wouldn't want Japan to become another Australia on some levels, but certainly, I mean, when it comes to things like having a family, there are some lessons I think that can be learned. Thanks for the feedback on the video quality. So it is good. So maybe I should be using this. Sound could be clearer, and I can see the sound levels, and I think I might need to get a new mic. Maybe it's the mic. It's not getting enough juice from this thing. I could also talk in a bigger voice, but sleeping child and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, there's always cloning. It kind of, all of these things now, we're getting closer now that people, and it's been in the news lately, that they keep unlocking, like the specific parts of the genes that trigger aging and so on, and how to actually, I mean, we could be getting within the foreseeable future close to, scientifically being able to stop people dying of old age. I don't know if that's actually a solution to anything. If that happens, I think that the Logan's Run scenario, I don't think that's natural or healthy at all for that to happen, but that's something which could be happening within our lifetimes, and we could be stuck with all of these old Japanese people forever, and the old Asian people like myself. But who knows? I think like Michael says, single life here is too attractive. Everyone here works so late in the day, and to have sex, you need to have a love hotel and time to relax. Well, but I think, on the love hotel thing, young people mostly live by themselves, and unlike New Zealand or Australia or America, there's a lot of apartments here designed for living alone. The hotel thing is mainly for people who live, with family. So not necessarily that, and there again, it's always the hobbies and dating and stuff like that. That is the excuse that people use for getting out of work early. And it's just kind of funny. I think now people are actually maybe hobbies are becoming more sufficiently interesting that they don't even feel the need to go out and drink and look for women anymore, or vice versa. Perhaps that's happening. So people can hear the hiss from the mic. So this is the mic. This is the one, right? I think it could be picking up. Oh. Now, wait a minute. Oh, okay. So the stream which I was just watching there for a minute, it showed an error, which kind of worried me for a minute. But it's all there. It's all there. I'm only going to go a little bit longer. This has been 45 minutes, and I think it's been a successful test. I will prepare more next time. Sorry about the mic thing. the banner should be a little bit bigger, or maybe I'll look at redesigning it a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's just a little graphic thingy what's it. But well, I'll ask again. Hugo Major, what was your question again? Let me show. I recently read the headline, UNESCO to list Japanese food as an intangible cultural heritage. What do I think of this, and how do I think this will go with respect to endangered species? So endangered species, you're talking about like whale? I don't know about that. Let me see. Well, in terms of Japanese food as UNESCO cultural heritage, I think that's wonderful. Japanese food is, of course, fantastic. And frankly, not just even sushi, not even the Japanese food, the Western food. I mean, Japanese are just good at cooking, and they're good with ingredients. And they're pretty much all food in Tokyo is pretty good, no matter what it is. I don't really get this thing as this kind of UNESCO heritage fetish that Japan has. Everything seems to be registered with UNESCO lately. I think UNESCO actually has an office inside the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Culture and Education. So I guess that's perhaps why. But yes, I'm sorry. The computer. I think it is picking up the computer fan noise. And let me just check if. So I've got the front focused. I'm sorry, it's picking that up. Maybe if I just hold this by hand, it'll pick it up less. But yeah, with the UNESCO thing, I don't know. It's like, it's great that Japan has so many heritage sites, but I think it's almost like too much. To me, I've got a personal thing that, for years and years, Japan tried to list Mount Fuji as a UNESCO global natural heritage, which is what it should. It's a huge mountain. It's a symbol of Japan, and, that's what they should have been aiming for. But they kept getting rejected because every time the UNESCO people come and they have certain criteria for natural heritage sites, that they have to be protected from garbage and abuse, and and every time they went, there's a lot of illegal garbage dumping around Mount Fuji. There's farming. There's the place is like treated like a huge garbage site. The suicide forest, the famous one, is very nearby. There's there's kind of a lot of stuff which the three prefectures around Mount Fuji really needed to pull finger and really invest a lot of money in really trying to look after Mount Fuji in order to get it to qualify for the UNESCO heritage status. But what happened instead, after trying and failing 3 times and after some half-hearted attempts to improve things, rather than actually try to do what they were supposed to do to protect Mount Fuji and to really make it worthy of global natural heritage, they figured out a loophole of just applying for cultural heritage instead, where it got accepted. So they got it registered as UNESCO, and as a result, they can keep treating it like a toilet, which is kind of a shame. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the UNESCO thing is a little bit like a small version of the Olympics to me. I don't really understand fully what the benefit of it is, but it's kind of a status and prestige thing, which, great, they got it. With regards to food, I have no idea how that translates. I mean, I don't think Japanese diet is based on endangered food. I know there's the association with tuna and whale meat and whatnot. It's not like they eat pandas necessarily. In fact, I mean, the whole definition of Japanese cuisine, if you ask me, is the reason that they're good with food here is because Japan is a country which basically, until the 20th century, until the late Meiji period, late 19th century anyway, famine was a pretty normal part of life here. Japan is not a human-friendly country. If you have a look at the NHK documentaries that look at all the civilizations that have been in Japan, they've found like 4 or 5. Like, there have been people in Japan over like the last 6,000 or 7,000 years or something crazy, going about like 10,000 years. But they've kind of come to Japan and survived for a few hundred years and starved to death, and then different people came. And then they starved to death, and then more people came, and they starved to death. Japan only started to sustain population when Chinese were able to come over with, rice growing technology, and they figured out how to grow rice in Japan. But, Japan is a rocky, harsh weather, volcanic. It's not a very food friendly country traditionally. And even all through the whole shogunate period, there were like one El Nino and, half the country would die in a famine. Not unlike what you used to hear about Ireland, for example. So the point is, when Japanese were having dinner and it's only a fish and some rice and some seaweed, they focused a lot of time and effort onto making sure that they did those things very well. And I think that's the thing that coming from a culture, British culture, which tends to just put a bunch of vegetables and meat into a pot with salt and boil it. I think British cuisine or British culture pretty much abuses food, and there's a Protestant thing behind that. This idea that indulging and obtaining pleasure out of food is somehow sinful. I've heard about this as a Protestant kind of a thing, whereas Japanese kind of go the opposite way. They don't gorge, or they're still, Japan is kind of a Protestantish kind of culture, but with regards to food, I think they've got it right. It's not like you have to have crappy food to show humility. It's like they actually show humility by showing food respect here, and that's what comes out, and that's why they do all food great here. I have no idea how that's going to be translated or marketed into global heritage. I think Japanese are starting to accept as well that tuna is going to be off the diet in the near future. It does kind of alarm people, but I don't think people are demanding. I think there's a perception that Japanese want to wipe out whales and tuna, and that's not true. In fact, remember, Japan actually supports the moratorium on whaling, which Iceland and Norway don't. I think generally, broadly speaking, Japanese do. But the point is, when Japanese support the moratorium on whaling, they support it because they want to let the number of whales increase so that they can eat them again. It's a different thing to, whereas Australia, they discovered oil in Saudi Arabia and they didn't need them for, for making tires anymore. And all of a sudden, whales are like these super wonderful things that we need to protect. Whereas, it never changed for Japan. The whole point of conservation was letting us eat more of them. And maybe this is the fear. If they have a moratorium on tuna fishing, all of a sudden we're going to have Australians talking about how tuna are like super intelligent animals. Maybe they are. And maybe there'll be a cultural war over that as well. But I don't think there's any opposition to restricting catches and acceptance that the cost of tuna is going to go up. And I don't think that UNESCO heritage is going to affect that. And definitely, Mitch, let's go get a panda burger soon. I know a good place. Just between us. What else we got here? Yeah, the computer 100%. Sorry about, it's making a lot of noise. I might put a towel under that or something just to suppress the noise. I'll hold the mic otherwise. I wonder, I'm pretty sure I am using this mic. Yes, not the computer mic. So, yeah, it's still noisy even with that. It's annoying that it picks that up. Some people asking me about the TPP. I'm all for the TPP. New Zealand, founding member of the TPP. New Zealand, through necessity in the 80s, got rid of all trade barriers and subsidies and tariffs and so on. And, and the idea of being able to get all that cool food and to not have to pay. Japan has pretty high tariffs on a lot of things. I'm personally all for it. Of course, it would affect farmers and rural Japan very negatively. But, Japan is frankly held hostage by, as is France, as is Britain traditionally. Most countries to some extent are held hostage by the countryside. Democratically, of course, votes in some rural parts of Japan are worth like 5 urban votes. Urban dwellers like myself get screwed in Japanese democracy and in the economy. The economy is based on, making sure farmers can earn a very good income and live very comfortably without doing very much, while people in the cities, don't get the same sort of support and they have to buy all this very expensive food. I don't think the farmers should be screwed necessarily, but at the same time, I think, who do you prioritize? The consumers or there's the philosophy which we've been through in Japan, and there's a big cultural shift in New Zealand, from a very socialist minded that, the government should make sure that everybody is happy and looked after, and, we don't need to be competitive, everyone should be able to do what they want to do, to this kind of mentality which came through with my generation, that, if New Zealand is not able, we used to make cars in New Zealand, for example. It was required by law that we had to manufacture cars. And, as a result of manufacturing 4,000 or 5,000 cars a year, all cars went up like 20-30% in price due to tariffs, and the cars that were being made in New Zealand weren't that great in comparison to what you could buy from overseas. So nobody was really benefiting except for the 400 workers who are making cars. And the philosophy is, if you can't make those cars better than someone else in another country, then why not let people focus on doing what they do well and give people the benefit of their hard work doing what they do well by being able to buy the best stuff at the best price? If people can grow Japanese rice in Indonesia, I say let the Indonesian people get the money. Why, let the Japanese farmers find another job, doing something that they can do competitively. That said, of course, in the case of rice specifically, Japan looks at rice as a national security issue. The last time Japan ran out of rice was the 1930s, and they took a whole Lebensraum approach of getting land in China to make up for it, which of course did not work out well. And that's, I think, why China doesn't make a big fuss about Japan's rice tariffs, even though America does. I think everyone has to accept that Japan is always going to protect rice production, but I don't see why it needs to protect butter production or wheat or stuff like that. That's really only just for Hokkaido. And for one prefecture, the whole country gets held hostage. I don't get that. So I'm all for the TPP myself, although some aspects of TPP do suck, especially intellectual property. The way that the American corporations are screwing the American people through the extended copyright and the crazy IP laws that they have in the States. And the United States is extending those laws. Now they're kind of forcing other countries, including those joining the TPP, to adopt their own insane standards of protection of Mickey Mouse, which is dumb. And that's not good, but by and large, the cheaper food and better quality stuff I'm all for. That's my personal take on that. Ecstatic Jack. Crows are crazy intelligent. Japanese crows are famous. There's people who study them, and honestly, they're smarter than some people I know, pretty much. So yes, Peter Gunnar Eriksson. Yes, I do have a Zoom mic. It's an H2. It's good, but I don't know. It's not Nirvana. It's not the best. It's okay. I like it. I like the fact I can use it as a USB mic, or I could unplug the USB at the battery and use it as a portable recorder, and it's quite good quality. But who knows? So I'm going to refresh one more time, answer a couple more questions, and wrap up. How did you like this? Should I make this a regular thing? I think this is something I want to do in addition to the Oyaji thing, because especially I haven't done something in 2 or 3 weeks now. I might set up a regular night. I also want to do something in Japanese once a week. I always plan all these shows that I never get around to doing. Olden Youth points out, even Japanese eel, they're importing all these foreign eels. I guess with rivers disappearing or getting cemented over and whatnot, it's tough, but indeed. In stratosphere, is there enough space for the heat to dissipate from the, I assume you mean from the computer. Actually, this is like a full-on heater. It's actually quite warm in here, even though it's cold tonight. But that is it. So, thanks all for joining. It's been cool chatting. Like I said, this is a technical test, but it was still quite good fun. And talk to you all again soon. Thanks for the chat, and take care. Leave some comments on what you think and any ideas. If I'm going to do this kind of thing, a live show more regularly, what do you want to see? You want to see a Japanese show? You want to see certain topics? Give me some ideas, and I'll set this up into a more regular thing. I think this went well. So good talking to you all. Peace. How do you end one of these things? Where's the button? I need to. Let's try.